Thank you very much. At first, I really have to tell you how honored I am that I can address you this morning in this huge hall, and I really would like to thank our honorable host, German Minister Maas and Altmaier, for creating this great atmosphere and bringing a lot of positive energy into this room. I'm very glad to see my very good colleagues, Fatih Birol, Director General, Mr. Adnan, lots of colleagues, ministers from all over the world, lots of CEOs, directors, activists, and as I have seen, very inspirational entrepreneurs from Africa. So, distinguished guests, I really think that we had an excellent start, and I think that if you are talking about energy transition dialogue, it's enough to look around this room how important this topic has become and what kind of tremendous interest it creates among the policymakers, scientists, civil society activists, and of course energy experts from all over the world. I would like to thank to Lucia, and I really felt privileged that I could listen to her personal experience, because I think if we as Europeans have one very important task, this is to share our knowledge, to share our experience, and to make sure that we will help those millions of people living in Africa to get basic access to electricity. And I think that we can do it through the efforts of such entrepreneurs like Lucia, who is not only a role model, I'm sure, for her daughter, but for a lot of women across Africa and a lot of entrepreneurs there. And I just like to tell you that we are working hard together with our European institutions, European Investment Bank and member states, to make sure that we put in place external investment fund, which I hope will bring more than 40 billion euros to Africa to support exactly the projects like described. Decentralized power grids, local production, prosumers development, which doesn't require huge power plant and hundreds of kilometers of cables being pulled across Africa, because you can develop energy locally. So that should be our task, and in this we have very strong European-African partnership. If you allow me to develop on the topics which both ministers, Maas and Altmaier, presented so eloquently, I think that it's only fair that this kind of large-scale dialogue is happening here in Berlin, of all places, because as we have heard, and I totally subscribe to the statement, Energiewende is no longer a German concept. It used to be back in the days when energy transition was still a marginal issue in most countries, but back then Germany was promoting and boosting habit share in renewable energy as, I would say, such a lonely pioneer. By now, this German concept has been successfully exported across Europe and, I would say, around the world. Actually, the German word Energiewende has entered into vocabulary of many languages, and as we have seen this morning, there is no need for translation. In fact, the last year, the Financial Times published an article which went viral, and the title was Big Green Bang. It attempted to explain how renewable energy became an unstoppable resource and industry all over the world. A special section was dedicated to the role of Germany in triggering this process, and then it argued that the last decade, the green energy industry was still expensive, sluggish, and German. As we all know, the prices of renewable energy since then are dropping very fast, and the clean energy is becoming global and irreversible reality. So we can say that green energy of today is competitive, dynamic, and truly European. And on top of it, I would say, very sustainable job creator, which managed to create jobs even during the harsh economic crisis we went through. And today we can say that we have 9 million people working in a clean/green tech industry. Of course, this has a major impact on public opinion. This has a major impact on decision making, and I think that if we would look how to best translate the Energiewende into the Brussels-ish, the language the EU speak, we use in Brussels, I would really translate it as the energy union. Why? Let me explain. As we all know, Europe's economy is at a major crossroad. We have been experiencing a combination of geopolitical instabilities affecting our energy supply. We are still faced with underinvestment into the energy infrastructure and into the climate technology investment if we want to meet our Paris goals. And we went through very difficult economic and financial crisis, which has really highlighted how urgently we need to undertake very clear steps to address the climate change. So this combination of different factors has manifested in a clear and urgent need to act collectively at the European level. And there was a need to do things differently as well, not to repeat the past. The novelty is that for the first time, the European Commission is treating energy not as a standalone policy field, but as an umbrella for most of others. The Energy Union project team brings together 14 commissioners and their respective services in a project that I have the honor to lead. I can tell you that's a lot of coffees with my colleagues. But the fact that we are able to work on this cross-sectoral, inter-portfolio, yearly political input decision-making process brought a lot of changes and brought a lot of positive experiences. And we need it because the size and the scale of this project implies a prominent place among the Commission's priorities. We are not only assuring we have a stable and a sustainable supply of energy, we are also looking into the ways how to modernize and energize the entire economy in the smartest, most sustainable, future-proof way. And this requires not only energy policies, but concerns our trade agreement. It affects our digital infrastructure. It reinforces our climate diplomacy, and it boosts the rights of our consumers, and it brings new demands for the transportation technologies, for the agricultural practices, for creation of investment platforms, research funds, and I can go on and on and on. But I think already this example of the priorities we have to cover to show how wide our efforts in getting things right if it comes to energy transition we have to jointly undertake. So we kicked off the Energy Union with very high ambitions when adopted overall strategy in February 2015. And we have seen from the beginning that Energy Union is actually the engine of the fourth industrial revolution. It might be this time electric engine rather than a steam or fuel engine, and we would rely of course more on renewables than on coal, and more on internet and social media than printing presses. But we know that when we have these three sectors in the proper constellation, it always leads to next industrial revolution. We are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, and of course we want to make sure that just like previous three revolutions, this one can and should be led by Europe. We learned that fragmented national solutions will not achieve sufficient scale, and EU-level efforts supporting the aggregation and coordination between national and regional initiatives is clearly essential for Europe to win the industrial leadership race. In practice, this means supporting Europe's R&D in order to continue and accelerate the trend of the new discoveries. It means assisting existing European startups and scale-ups to successfully cross the notorious valley of death and reach the marketable scale. And for this, we have also to provide other financial tools like Connecting Europe facilities, like Juncker Fund. I'm strong promoter of something what I called innovation dividend. Because what I hear from our startup colleagues is that we are not looking that much for a grant. We look for first contract. We look for equity investment. We look for somebody to be partnered with, so we can demonstrate that we can develop our idea in a product which could be placed on the market. And I really want to create the better system where our great ideas from European labs will not be marketed or sold in the United States or China. I want our scientists to strive here in Europe, and I think it's our common task if we want to be successful in modernizing of our economy. It also means that we have to work much more together in the support of macro cross-border infrastructure projects, but that we also involved in these discussions local and city levels where often the most ambitious projects are presented. One of my nicest surprises in my job in being the Energy Union Vice President was very active role our mayors in Europe, but I can say across the world, are playing in energy transition. Why? Because they are the first addresses when the people are complaining, where the air is unbreathable, where the traffic is congested, where simply they do not have the services they as a citizens insist they have a right for. And therefore, that cooperation in the European and global covenant of mayors means that they want to be 100% sure that they will have proper access and the knowledge of European funds, and that they would use the programs which are designed to help their cities. And they are big supporters of the project of decentralized infrastructure. They are the first to support smart grids, energy storage, local renewables production, smart transportation, and many other projects. And I'm really proud of the role the European mayors are playing in the global covenant of mayors, because they represent the lion's share of the participation, where more than 6,000 mayors from Europe is playing a very important role. And from the local level, we should continue to the individual level and invest in lifelong learning and vocational trainings. Millions of new jobs are being created in the new economy, but we must also constantly think about those whose jobs will no longer exist and equip them with the new tools for the future. As you know, this is a challenging task, because top 10 jobs today on the labor market, where every company is looking for the expert, top 10 jobs of today haven't existed just 5 years ago. That's how dynamically the global labor market is evolving and challenging, and this is how we have to adjust what we teach our youngsters at the universities and how we adjust our long life learning program for the future. And finally, we need to make sure that an appropriate European regulatory framework is in place to match our common goals and objectives. This is what we have been doing over the past 4 years, and this is how we have translated the Energy Union into the concrete legislative proposals and executive measures which are turning our vision into new reality. We aimed at better integrating our industrial competitiveness objective into other EU policies. This includes investment plan for Europe, the Capital Markets Union, which should bring more investment into the projects linked with the Energy Union. We put the strategy of single market and completing the work on making sure that finally we would have internal energy market in Europe on the high level. We are working very actively on trade, on circular economy, and of course on digital single market. Our legislative work is being concluded. Our proposals are now in the hands of the co-legislator. I call it final stretch, because now it's the European Parliament and the Member States who will put the final touches, and I believe adopt all the proposals at latest by the end of these years. Because we have already agreed some major proposals which are already changing the energy and climate landscape of Europe. We adopted new ETS framework for 2030, and we see how the carbon price started to climb after that decision. We adopted all series of measures under the security of supply regulation for gas, decision on transparency of intergovernmental agreements, and we are finalizing our work on outstanding pieces of legislation on Energy Union governance, Renewables Directive, and the electricity market design. In a few weeks, we will close the loop for transportation as well. We already adopted 2 packages for the modern mobility, and in a few weeks we are going to conclude on this file as well by presenting new proposals for emission standards for heavy-duty vehicles. Let me reassure you that this process is not being done behind the closed doors. The political decisions which are being made right now are too important for being done in some kind of exclusive, closed manner. We therefore are eager to make our processes as transparent as possible and inclusive as it could be, because I am first to tell you that I know that we cannot build energy union in Brussels. We need to build it here in Berlin, in Slovakia and Poland, all across the EU member states, and I would say also in our neighboring countries where they would like to cooperate with us and align their legislation with the European systems. And we are ready, as I said at the beginning, to export our positive experience and technology and to share it with our partners in our third country partners. I know that to talk about energy is very often seen as a topic to be discussed with the experts, but I think that it's our common duty to engage personally in explaining why energy transition is important, what the climate change is representing for the whole mankind, and therefore what I'm trying to do is to travel extensively across Europe to make sure that so-called energy union tours will bring these ideas to the wider public. If you allow me to conclude with one of the ideas which I had the honor and I appreciate the chance to discuss it so early on with Minister Altmaier in his mandate. For us to succeed, and I believe to set the good example for the world, is to clearly demonstrate that we have not only global framework in the form of Paris Agreement, that we would have this new forward-looking and I believe the most modern energy and climate legislation in place. We need to have our member states on board. And therefore, I'm pleading to work together with our member states so each one of them would develop their national energy and climate plans, that they would do this homework, this strategizing, brainstorming within the member states. How do I picture my country in 2030? What kind of energy mix do I foresee for my country, and how we are going to build that path to the carbon neutral future of the second part of the century, because this is what we sign up to Paris. We are working with our member states to have these national energy and climate plans before the end of this year, and I believe that this would be the strong underpinning we need for the new global and European framework, where the member states would show their buy-in, where they would send strong signals to the investors, and where we see that this energy transition is taking place here in Europe, concretely on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to debrief you on what we do together with our member states in Europe, and I'm very much looking forward to our debate, discussions, and lots of bilateral meetings which we prepared for ourselves. And once again, thanks to Germany, our gracious host. Thank you very much.